Hi everyone, I'm Greg from the Laser channel where we learn, create, and share. And today I'm going to share with you how I created this awesome custom red towel by making my very own ink block. I'm going to go through step by step everything you need to know to get great results just like this. I'm going to get things kicked off by covering the materials I'll be using in today's block printing project. For this, let's start with the block material. I selected some beechwood. I happen to have this on hand, but it's also a perfect candidate because the wood grain structure is very tight and it's very even. And this is going to bring out a lot of detail in our wood engraving. Other alternatives for block material would be a lino cut block. That is the proper material to use on a project like this. However, in the studio today, I don't have any on hand. And also in a pinch, I could use some 1/4-inch plywood. This is the one that I'd recommend the least, but if you just want to try this project out, 1/4-inch plywood is a great place to start. The ink I'm going to be using is from Speedball. This is actually ink for printing out or screen printing t-shirts, and it works great for this block printing. The kind that I'm using is from Speedball. It's one of the more common ones that you can find at different craft stores. I just happened to pick up two of the most basic colors, black and white, but know that these come in a host of different colors. Oh, and did you notice the little sign that I've got in the back? I made myself an award last year at about this time in August for reaching 10,000 subscribers. That's personally a huge milestone for me. So thank you to everybody that subscribes to the channel. And if you haven't subscribed, now would be a perfect time to do that. Not only is it a perfect way to help this channel grow, it's an awesome way to connect content like this with other great viewers just like you. Oh, and by the way, the Speedball ink is water cleanup. If I get any on me during this project, as long as I get it washed right away, it comes right out. However, once the ink sets, that's it. There's no cleaning the ink up after that. When I'm ready to start applying ink up to the engraved block, I'll get a nice even coating using a brayer. And when it comes to the material to apply the block printing to, it's going to really be my imagination that's going to be the limiting factor. If I'm just starting out with this, I highly recommend using some black construction paper. I can also use some things like a tank top t-shirt or this nice soft bucket hat, maybe a nice logo across the front. But in today's video, I'm going to be using some of these red shop towels, and this is going to make perfect sense once we take a look at the graphic for today's block printing project. In just a second, we're going to be checking out Lightburn software and the artwork that I selected for today's project. But before that, I almost forgot one of the most important things for today's project outside of my imagination, and that's going to be the laser machine. I'm going to be using the Monport 65 Pro CO2 laser machine. I selected this machine because I need to do a very deep engraving in this beech block, and a 65 watt CO2 laser machine is going to make quick work of that. And stick around to the end of the video because there's something really cool I want to share with you about this machine. But before we do that, we've got to continue on with this project. Next up, I'll meet up with you within Lightburn software. So it's something I may have overlooked when I mentioned I'm using the Reno Pro, which is what the camera's sitting on right now. Is the Reno Pro is Lightburn compatible, which is one of my favorite software packages to use. Now let's take a look at what I've got for the graphic. I am the warranty with a hand holding onto a wrench, which now it makes sense where I'm going to be using some of these red shop towels, very, very fitting. Now, a couple key things about my graphic setup is I want the graphic and the lettering to be still raised up so that when I apply the ink to it, what we see in blue right here is going to be the actual ink image. Now, when I click on the preview button here, that's what I need to do is leave alone everything that I want raised up, all the text in the graphic, and I need to engrave away basically everything in the background, which is kind of opposite of what we do when we engrave. And I'll show you what I mean. I'm going to get rid of this box that I drew around everything, and this would now be kind of like the conventional engraving. Now when I hit the preview button, we're going to see I would be engraving the text in the graphic just like we would expect. So if I use this for the block printing, I would be loading ink on everything that is white here, essentially everything that is not engraved on that beach block. So in order to get that, we saw that I drew this outline around everything. See if I get it exactly in the right spot. I think that looks good. And that's how I engrave or reverse engrave everything to get the style and the effect that I'm looking for. The outside line here, that's a tool layer. That's going to be the size of my wooden block, which is just under 100 millimeters. And in freedom units, that's going to be 3.95 inches. And lastly, the most important thing I need to do on my graphic is I need to mirror it. I'll select everything, and then I'm going to hit this mirror button up at the top. And that's because when I do block printing, the block image has to be reversed in order for it to show up correctly on the material that we're stamping the image onto. That all looks good. Let's take a look at some of the settings that I'll be using for the engraving. I'm going to be running at a fairly pedestrian speed of 275 millimeters per second at a pretty high power level of 75% for both the max and the min power. Of course, I've got the mode set to fill. And the lines per inch is going to be set at essentially about 300 lines. I'll make sure that I'm doing all shapes at once, and this should provide a nice deep engraving the very first pass, but if I need to, I can always go back and add a second pass. I'll get the blanks set up in the Reno machine, and I'll be ready to start the engraving process. Here's my standard setup for placing material inside of the machine. I always block it in with some magnets. This honeycomb, by the way, is included with the Reno machine, and as we can see, it is magnetic. The other thing I do to make sure that this is perfectly square against this gantry that the laser head runs on is I take a nice block of material that I know is true and flat, and I place it up against the gantry, and I just slide it down, and then I place my work material up against it and then do the block in with all of the different magnets, and I get perfect results every time. From here, I just need to set the focus, and I'll use the controller display on the machine to get it roughly in position somewhere over the material. And all of the Reno machines have this magnetic focusing guide assist on the side. And from there, all I do is take the included tool, place it in the socket, and now I start raising the laser bed up, and I'll continue to do this until that little plunger pops up. Now I'm in perfect focus. If I want to double check that, the machine of course does come with a focusing gauge. There's a little arrow with the default focus, and I can slide that underneath the nozzle here, and it is perfectly set. This method of setting focus is truly very simple, but it is so repeatable. I've done tests on this off camera, and it's really a great way to set the focus of the laser machine quickly and very reliably. Well, I think that's it. From here, I'll just close the lid and connect the exhaust system, and we'll watch a video montage of the laser engraving. Engraving's complete, and let's check this out. Oh, I like what I see. I've got clean engraving all around, all the lettering, and just check out all the detail on this graphic. We're also going to see that there's a lot of smoke residue over, well, everything. I'm going to have to get that cleaned up before I apply any ink. To clean that up, I'm going to give it a nice liberal coating of some LA's Totally Awesome. It's really going to just melt away all of the smoke residue. I'm going to give it a quick rinse with some warm water after that, and then towel dry it and give it a few minutes to really dry out the rest of the way. I'll meet back up with you in just a second after this is all cleaned up. Let's check out how the LA's Totally Awesome did. Whoa, check this out. It's a night and day difference. Next up, it's time to ink the block up and start making some custom crafted towels. Now, one of the things that I realized during my lunch break while this was drying is yesterday when I was planning this out, I was planning on using a much bigger block or a different material, but I found this and I'm like, this is gonna be great stuff. However, the briar is going to be basically as wide as the block, which means I'm going to get ink on this outside edge that I don't want to. So when we see me inking this up, I'm going to have some blue painter's tape around the outside. I'll get the block inked up, I'll remove the tape and do the press. So with that, I'll get to it and we'll make the first towel. Let's check out the setup I'll be using for making the very first towel. I want to protect my tabletop from any ink that might squish through this thin towel. For that, I have a piece of scrap poster board. And next I can lay my material out. In this case, the red towels I've been talking about this entire video. The block, of course, I've got the perimeter all taped off. I wish I had something a little bit larger where I wouldn't have to do that, but this is where we're at, and this will still work. To spread the ink out, I have a piece of aluminum that this is actually for underneath honeycomb. I have an extra one around, so this will work perfectly. And I think between the two colors that I have, I'm going to go with the black for this towel. All I need is probably a couple pea-sized dollops down. This ink really goes a long way. It's pretty much super, super thick acrylic paint. From here, I'm just going to take my briar and just really load the briar up. And for that, I'll just make a nice big patch here. Once that looks good and it's all completely loaded up, I'll be ready to move on to loading up my block. Now, because this is the first time that I'm using this block, I am going to load it up with ink and actually just give it a minute or two for that ink to kind of settle into some of the very small pores of this beechwood. If I was using a proper linoleum block for block printing, I could use this right away. Again, that linoleum really is the perfect material to use. It holds the ink, but gives it up very quickly when we go to press it down on a material. I'm going to give this a minute or two to set, and I'll be ready to reapply some more ink and do our first block printing. It's been a couple minutes, and I'm going to load up the briar again, some ink, transfer it over to my block, and yeah, this is inking out much better. Now, if I am really new to this and I want to test out my block before I start using some material, maybe you're not using a cheap red tow, maybe you've got your favorite t-shirt, I can always go and grab something like a sheet of paper and do a practice print. The cool thing about this 100mm size, or 4 inches by 4 inches, is if I just do a couple CPR presses on it, my body weight's enough for the proper pressure to should be able to make a nice print. We're going to see on this first one though, well, it looks like it failed. I didn't have enough ink loaded up on my block, so this is a great way to practice getting the right technique to get the proper results. Get a bit more ink down. That feels a lot better on the briar. We'll reapply some more ink, and we'll give this another go. The other thing for these practice ones, we're going to see that I'm also leaving the blue tape on as well. Just it's an extra step that I don't need to do on these practice ones. The other thing that I can also do is if I had a second briar, I could actually do this reversed. I could keep it faced up like this, and I could actually run a briar over the top of this. And in fact, let me look around and see if I can find something that would mimic that. I think this can of spray paint will do perfectly. This is going to focus the pressure I'm putting down a lot better, and I should get a lot better ink transfer. There we go. That is basically perfect. I think once I remove the tape off the outside that's building up some thickness, I'll have the rest of the imprint that I'm looking for. And with this being a shop towel and crafty, you know, I'm not looking for everything to be absolutely perfect. I want this to be a functional towel, and even if I had results like this on the towel, I think that would look great. You know, projects like this are some of my favorite ones to make. It's a simple, fun project that you wouldn't think to normally make, and it's incredibly relaxing to do, and it's just really up to your imagination on what you'd like to put down for a design. This time I'm going to quickly peel all the tape off before the ink starts to set. It is pretty thick, and I do have an amount of time to work with it. But the quicker I can ink the block up and get it down to the material, the better the results I typically get. Get that flipped over right. Push it down, get some nice pressure on that. And let's check out how this first one went. A little bit light, but we get the general idea, and all the text is facing the correct direction. Now I can keep on doing this and keep loading up more and more ink on the block as I continue to fine-tune the technique that I need for this block with this type of material. When it comes to drying the ink, I can set this out and just let it air dry for a little bit. I can certainly look up the instructions at Speedball and find out what they recommend for the drying on here. But I do know that this will air dry in several days. If I'm in a bit of a rush, they do make special t-shirt heat lamps that will get this to cure a lot faster. Kind of a step in between would be using something like a blow dryer with the heat on high and just kind of hover that around the material for a little bit until the ink takes a good set. And after that, it'll be ready to go. I think I'm going to make a couple more of these and try and get the ink to show up a little bit darker on here, but so far, I'm loving all the detail that I get, especially on the fist and the wrench in the middle. I got done with another one, and I'm getting the technique down on this. Let's get a close-up look at this. Look at that. That is filling in a lot better, and these are the results that I'm looking for. And from here, if I choose to, I continue to load up more ink on the block and make as many of these towels as I would like. Once I have the initial investment in the block, making a lot of duplicates on the material goes by pretty quick. Once all my materials were all block printed, I immediately took my ink pad and my brayer, went in the house, took some warm water to it, and they rinse right off really quickly. The block itself, I'm actually going to let the ink kind of season into the wood. That's kind of one of the drawbacks of using solid wood or even plywood is the first go around when I go to block print, it does take a little bit more effort to get all of the ink to properly transfer over to the towel. And I'm looking at the monitor screen and it looks like you can see through this towel. I think maybe next time when I get materials, I'll spend a little bit more and get some higher quality ones. I think the next time I try a project like this, I'm going to get some proper linoleum blocks that are normally hand carved, but I'm going to use the laser machine to carve out my design. Those linoleum blocks that are really designed for ink pressing like this, it holds the ink so much better and it gives up the ink so much easier. So I get a lot easier and a much more better ink contrast down to my materials. Now, in the background, a couple of weeks ago off camera, I did try out a very intricate design, and I'm going to show you what that looks like. Just another variation of this project that I did block printing on some paper. Here's the design I made a couple weeks ago. It's very detailed, and we can see that I used white ink for this project. The media that I used was some black construction paper. and all of that rich detail perfectly transferred over. What kind of a project would you make using this method? Let me know down below by leaving a comment. Now in today's project, I only used one color for this very simple design just to kind of illustrate the process. Nothing says that I couldn't do this and split the design up into different segments and do each different segment in a different color. Now, one of the questions or challenges that arises is how to get the next block or the next color placed exactly in the right spot. And a quick, easy way to do that is to make a frame and get some double-sided tape on one side, and then I can stick that down to my work material. Then I can take my design with the first color on it, get it lined up, press that, release it, give that a little bit with maybe a blow dryer to get the ink to initially set. Then I can take my next block with the next color and do the same thing. And I can repeat the process for as many colors as I would like until I have the design that I'm looking for. Now, for those of you who want to find out the cool thing about the Reno machine, I haven't forgot about you. I discovered this the other day. This red strip in the front is the secret pass-through on the Reno machine. Without loosening up any screws on the machine, I can take this red bar in the front and push it out of the way. That opens a channel up to access the front of the machine. This is the front access pass-through on the Reno machine. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't have the matching pass-through on the back of the machine, which would have been really great, but to have a pass-through on the front to allow material, large material, hang out of the machine is definitely something pretty cool to have. Thanks for joining me in this video as I made this custom block printed red towel. I hope that you'll try this project out on your own, and I would love to see the results that you have. Stop over to the Laser Channel Facebook page and post a picture. I'd love to see it, and I'm sure other people would like to see what your creative mind also came up with. This video was, as usual, a lot of fun to make, and I hope that you enjoyed it. If you do, please give it a like. Subscribe to the channel. Not only is it a great way to help the Laser Channel grow, it's an awesome way to connect video content like this with other great people just like yourselves. And until we meet again in the next video, learn, create, and share.